I had a hobby too. Mine happened to be guns and ballistics, and I studied guns and ballistics as much as I could, and I wrote an article about high velocity.
So out of all my years working at Weatherby, the last 5 have been some of the most exciting. Working with Adam, with him running the company.
And to think that I get the opportunity of carrying on my grandfather's legacy 75 years later here in Sheridan, Wyoming, I mean, it really is a dream come true.
Oh, I'm home. Thank God I'm home.
On our mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
All right. On our mark, the Weatherby Podcast. We've got very special guests, 2 guests today. One's going to be a little quieter than the other.
Well, maybe. If we take our hood off, maybe not.
We have Raven, the Peregrin Falcon, and also Raven's owner, senior biologist from the Peregrine Fund, Brian Mutch.
Yes, sir.
Joining myself, Luke Torkelson, and Kevin Wilkerson from Weatherby.
Yeah.
Man, we're super excited to have you here, and the topic today is falconry, and I think we're that's gonna go into a bunch of ways. We've got probably more questions than we have time.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that I know zero about this, and so it's an interesting perspective because
that's why it's perfect.
Literally know nothing about it.
Well, 20 years ago, I thought I knew everything, and 20 years later, I realized I know almost nothing. So,
wow.
I guess that's how it goes.
And for people listening to the podcast, it's very important that you know that there is a falcon sitting 2 feet from us right now.
We have
maybe a foot.
Raven is in the room. That's a funny name for a Peregrin Falcon.
When she was a
juvenile, Raven.
Yeah, when she was a juvenile, she was really black. I mean, she's a subspecies of peregrines that is extremely dark, that appeals pelei, Falco peregrinus pelei. They come from Alaska. This one, her lineage is the Aleutian Islands. They're one of the bigger subspecies, but she was very black. I mean, just at a distance, when ravens came and flew with her, she kind of looked like one. So that's how she got her name.
So, Brian, I met you last fall during hunting season, and I thought this was really interesting. I didn't know what to expect. Actually, I think it was Butch Whiting that reached out and was like, "Hey, you got to meet Brian and some of your coworkers from the Peregrine Fund."
Yep.
And they were you live here in Sheridan.
I do.
And those guys are in Arizona?
Yeah, Chris was in Arizona and Paul lives in New Mexico. And we were up with some folks in Zortman camped out showing them some falconry up there, and that's why they were in town here. We came back. He had a archery tag, Chris did, so that's why we were here.
So we arranged we're going to meet. We meet out just west of town here, and I got there a little bit early, and then Brian pulls up in his Toyota truck, and he's got a falcon riding shotgun. Just sitting in the front passenger
in a cage
seat.
Or in the seat?
Just sitting
on a perch, on the front seat.
Sitting in the front seat. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is awesome.
So, I don't want to disrupt that. So right now the bird's sitting on a perch. This is what it officially would be called?
Yeah, it's a falcon perch. That's sort of an Arab-style perch. There's various prototypes of but falcons sit on something like that where their feet are sort of flat. Hawks have a ring perch. If you had it was a goshawk, you'd have a different type of perch. They like a branch.
Sure, they like,
the hawks perch in trees. These guys perch on cliffs and things like that. So
that's why that's a stone piece?
Well, yeah, and that's just something unique. A lot of times it's a real fancy turned block, wooden block with AstroTurf top.
Okay.
But that's pretty unique. Some telemetry company made that for me. But yeah, anyway.
So give us just a little rundown on what's the Peregrine Fund?
Yeah, it was founded in 1970, and falconers sort of rallied to the cause of basically the Peregrin Falcon going extinct. The pesticide DDT, which was used during and after World War II, almost eliminated this bird and others as well. Yeah, from the United States. In fact, east of the Mississippi River, it did eliminate them. There was that subspecies of peregrine is probably gone totally. It was an eastern anatum. They were big like this, and that population went extinct. Anyway, the Peregrin Fund rose to that occasion. There was a number of falconers. Tom Cade was one of the founders. He was the founder.
Shout out.
Of the Peregrin Fund, and he teamed up with Jim Weaver, who is a founding board member of the Peregrin Fund. Bob Berry is a founding member of the Peregrin Fund. Pete Widener is on our board.
Lots of shout outs. I can't get to all the shout outs.
Yeah.
Shout out.
So these guys rallied to basically, and they were asked by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to help. They had tried to produce these birds in captivity and couldn't and didn't. And so the Peregrine Fund gathered falcons that were in falconers' hands. They were donated to the Peregrine Fund. They were successfully bred in captivity. And over the course of 25 years, we released over 4,000.
No kidding.
Back to the wild. DDT, of course, was banned largely as a result of the demise of this bird.
What about the DDT? Was it the chemical itself that was affecting the birds, or was it getting something that was in our diet?
Well, it was with peregrines. It went in, got into the food chain. So insects and you know that are eating plants. It's on the plants. It's in the insects. At every level, it concentrates up the level of the food chain. So it infected peregrines as bad as it ever could have. And what it does is essentially makes them lay a really thin-shelled egg, which typically breaks under the female's incubating weight. So it killed their productivity.
Wow.
And they went, most of these states in the West as well. Montana lost every single breeding pair, and Idaho and Wyoming, every pair was gone. There was a few states where a few hung on. So anyway, that I went to work for them. I met them. I knew they had peregrines, and I wanted to be around.
And what year was that?
Peregrines. I went to work for them. The first year would have been 1985 seasonally, and then I started in 1988, and I've worked for them ever since.
Wow.
On different programs. We work all over the world. Now, the peregrine was successfully recovered, delisted. I mean, certainly the single most successful recovery effort of an endangered species ever, and one that we did. I mean, we mankind.
Yeah.
We were the cause of the demise. And then we understood that. We stepped in and we fixed it. So pretty.
Peregrine Falcon down.
Yeah, no doubt. If you hear that in the background, that's the bird shaking.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a neat story, and the Peregrine Fund has gone on to do a lot of work with other endangered raptors. We work all over the world. But this was sort of the initial program and project, and a very successful one.
Wow. So you're a senior biologist for the Peregrine Fund, and what were you doing before? Was that straight out of school? Like
no.
What does it mean? I guess what the question is, what does it mean to be a senior biologist?
I mean, I've worked on a lot of different of these recovery efforts. I've worked on the California Condor project, the Adult Falcon project in the Gulf of Mexico. This program I worked on a lot. I worked on the Harpy Eagle program in Central America, South America. I've worked in the Arctic and Greenland on a program up there we have with Falcons. We have people in Africa, but it's all field. I mean, I do the field work. I'm the guy I drive a lot. I'm a good driver. I knew how to climb, cliffs and these big trees, and I knew how to handle these birds, trap these birds, and it's a skill set that, it worked for the Peregrin Fund, and it certainly worked for me. They told me if I'd ever get out of college, they'd hire me full time, so that was a good incentive. It took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree, but
all right.
I was too busy.
I think we're going to have to unpack a few bits of that. So field work.
Yeah.
You're not just like, there's a lot of driving.
Yeah.
So what, you're looking for a wild bird?
Yeah, I mean, with this program, it was locating release sites that were a location where we wanted to put a hack site, which is a location where we would put these young peregrines to release them from and release them to the wild. We'd have 2 hack site attendants, and hacking is a falconry term for releasing a bird to the wild. And the difference was in falconry, you trapped it back to fly it. That was applied to these recovery efforts, and the difference is instead of recovering them back to fly, we'd let them continue to feed them until they went wild, which takes about 6 or 7 weeks. But they don't need an adult. A group of these young were good on their own with 2 people feeding them all summer. So I mean, we're identifying these release sites. We're flying.
So in the beginning, where were you getting the birds you were
They're
releasing?
all captive raised. The Peregrin Fund they formed a captive breeding program, and falconers donated birds to them that they'd had.
Oh, sure.
And so
from a young age, then they could be in the wild.
And they put those birds in a breeding project, and all the young from those captive from those captive pairs were released into the wild.
Wow.
So that was a source of the young.
Wow.
And now they're recovered and they're back and they're doing well, but Yeah, I mean, the field work varies. I mean, it's in Greenland, it's all helicopter and boat and a lot of hiking into these remote locations up in the Arctic, looking at falconries going into the cliffs. Depends what we're doing and what you want, what you're interested in. We were taking blood samples. We put satellite transmitters on those birds and followed their entire migrations. Those birds were migrating to Central America from Greenland.
What?
7,500 miles one way, and making that journey. Wow. Year after year after year, you know, what a life. And it's neat because it tells you that the distance a bird might fly in during a period of time. You know, some of those durations from that satellite kicking on and shutting off, the thing periodically comes on and off to save the battery life.
Sure.
And so that, you know, there might be a 5-week or a 5-day window when it's off and then on, and when it is, you know, that bird might have went 1,000 miles.
Sure.
And they hit the same spots. You know, they know the good hunting.
Wow.
At Texas, the Gulf of Mexico is definitely a destination, at least a stopover some winter there. But they know all these hot spots, you know, like hunting, and this has got lots of shorebirds and waterfowl, and that's what these guys kind of excel at.
Wow.
Among other things. I mean, they're pretty opportunistic. I hunt them at what you would hunt them with a shotgun.
So that's what I don't know where we're going.
We're just going.
So that tells you a little bit about the fund.
Yeah, that's who I worked for, and they're doing wonderful things all over the world, conservation-minded. And I knew I wanted to do something conservation-minded when I saw this bird was about, when I was a kid.
So let's go from the beginning, because earlier you stated before this had started rolling that you had been doing this from a child.
Yeah, I mean, I was very interested in it. I know that some of the earliest memories of my life, my brother and I, we were hunting ducks in the Flathead Valley north of Missoula, and we were decoying ducks in a grain field. And my dad was off somewhere in the field doing the same thing, and he put us together, and we had these decoys out. And at that point, we knew what these birds were. We already had an interest in raptors. Now, how, I don't know. I mean, Craighead's lived in town. John Craighead, they're famous falconer. He wrote books on falconry. He went to India in the 40s or 50s and visited a famous falconer. And anyway, John was in town, and he had some birds still. He wasn't actively practicing, but so we saw it a little bit, but it struck a chord for sure. And anyway, that day we were duck hunting, a wild peregrine came in and kind of took a shot at the decoys, looked at him pretty close, and then a big ball of mallards was milling around the wheat field, and she took off after those. Didn't look like she got one, and then she kind of just turned south. It was fall, and probably continued on her migration. But at that point, that would have been 1976. I was 11, and they were gone. I mean, that was a really rare sighting to see a peregrine then.
Wow. There
was essentially no breeding pairs known in Montana, so that bird was probably an Arctic migrant or something. But it really left a mark that you know, I wanted these things around, and we got books on it. And kind of got into it. Well, then we had birds. We went through the process. You have to have a sponsor. You have to take a test and pass this test. And it's all about the well-being of these birds. That, you know, you're going to care for these birds properly and care for them right. And my parents, you know, made us do it. You're going to do this. You're going to do it legally and get the license and do it right. And so we did. And falcons is always people fly everything. They fly the hawks. They even fly eagles. But the falcons were really what interested me. I loved bird hunting with a gun, and I wanted to bird hunt with these. And they take birds out of the air, and they're just it's interesting.
So, what's the difference between a falcon, an eagle, and a hawk?
You know, just the anatomy, you know, and how they make a living. The size. I mean, there's obviously you know, size differences, anatomy, the feet, and how the structure is put together, right down to the feathers. You know, she's got these really stiff. Everything about her is built for speed.
Yeah. And I'm not too big on these raptors like you are. So a hawk would be smaller than what's in front of us?
Well, no, they could be much
different
bigger.
Species could be.
Yeah, there's species of hawks that are much littler. A sharp-shinned hawk, a little that nests up in the bighorns. They eat birds, but they eat little songbirds, little
really?
small birds. Ate mice. but they only weigh 3 or 4 ounces, and she weighs 38 ounces.
Wow.
But then there's hawks, there's ferruginous hawks, and they weigh 5 pounds, 6 pounds.
Okay, so yeah, there's
So
a range of
yeah,
all
huge.
between the hawk, the raptor, and the eagle. They all, except for an
Huge.
eagle, obviously
Yeah.
being pretty huge.
Yeah, they're like 10, 12 pounds, and so they're really big. I mean, they catch anything they want to. White-tailed jacks, I've seen them bind to an antelope and take an antelope down.
An eagle?
Yeah, and actually, in the wintertime, hunt them and kill them. And usually, it's a couple
Wow.
together.
There was a video that went viral last year of that eagle on the back of that antelope eating it while it was
Yeah.
walking.
Yeah,
Ooh, God, that was
I
gross.
watched Pete Widener and I were hunting sage grouse in Buffalo and watched an eagle take it didn't wound up not getting it, but man, it was
It gave it
impressive
hell.
fight. Yeah, impressive. But,
So you said you and your brother.
Yeah,
How
so-
old were you? You were 11 when you got inspired. How old were you when you got your first?
it's legal to get a license at 16, even
Okay.
way back then. By then, there was a law, and they had the test and those sorts of things. So when I was 16, I passed the test, got a red-tail hawk, learned sort of how to fly with a red-tail
back
hawk.
up-
you went,
back
to,
up,
you went to Walmart.
Yeah,
and
that's
got
my that's
red-tail hawk?
exactly my question.
Yeah.
You say you got a red-tail hawk.
You're supposed to trap it from the wild. There's 3 classes of falconers. There's an apprentice, a general, and a master class. An apprentice is someone's learning. One of those other classes sponsors you and helps you kind of through the process of learning and taking care of one of these hawks in captivity and that sort of thing. So mine actually the Fish and Game confiscated one from somebody. They had one illegally. I think they found one out of a nest, and I mean, they didn't mean to do the wrong thing. They just wanted to take care of it. But they weren't taking care of it very well. It had some problems, and so they knew I had just passed the test. They gave me that bird, and it was a youngster of the year. It couldn't fly yet. So I raised him up and until he could, was fully feathered, and started flying him and hunting with him. And, growing up in Missoula, there was not many rabbits there. There's a few snowshoe hares in the mountains. There's a few cottontails here and there. So, boy, I mean, I had to use my imagination. I wanted to hunt, and that was what it was all about. So, I was flying that bird at things people would never think, you would do with a red tail. I was flying him at those field-feeding flocks of mallards. I mean, in the wintertime, and he'd go out the window of my car. We'd be parked watching these mallards.
Together, by
Yeah.
the way, you and the bird.
Yeah, and my brother was always there. He always had a bird, and we'd let him go. The ducks would all land in the wheat field. He'd be watching, bobbing his head, looking, and he wanted out. And you let him go. He'd beat his wings about 10 times as hard as he could, and then he'd just coast to kind of stealth. He doesn't have the speed like this, so he's got to get right in there close. And he'd come in, and he'd see this wall of mallards erupt. I mean, thousands.
How cool would this
And
be
he'd
to
catch
see?
one almost every time, and it was so cool.
He'd get the
He'd
bird.
get right in there, and he might have been catching them on the ground before they even knew
Sure,
what happened.
sure.
He might have been catching them as they were lifting off.
But he was up in the air with the duck.
Well, he'd be when I got there
He'd
to
be
him. He'd be on it,
He'd
feeding
already be
on
eating
it.
it.
Yeah, they're too heavy to carry. So
Sure.
So anyway, I mean, I hunted pheasant with him. I hunted ducks with him. He caught a few rabbits, but I really learned a lot about hunting with that bird. But I could not wait to get a long wing, a falcon. We call these long wings.
This might be throwing yourself under the bus, but I'm just thinking, like, you're 16, it's high school, you're driving around with a falcon in your truck. I'm thinking back to my high school days, and I wasn't even on the radar. You were either the coolest kid in school, or
weirdest,
maybe the dorkiest kid in school.
Probably so. It's all my friends had pictures of girls, motorcycles, and cars on their walls, and I had pictures of peregrines. Yeah,
Peregrine
so cool.
Falcons.
But I know. I think it probably kept me out of a lot of trouble, but and maybe got me into some as well. But yeah, just progressed along. At 18, I was old enough. Well, I had a general class permit that lets you get a falcon, and that year I trapped a gyrfalcon.
Okay, great. So you trapped a falcon.
Yep.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. So you can catch a young bird of the year. You can't keep the adults. They're part of the breeding population, and you shouldn't be able to keep an adult. So, but they do allow you to take young of the year from whether it's from a nest or what we call a passage bird, a bird on its first migration. Wow. And so we went up to the Nine Pipes, the Flathead Valley. That was sort of our playground. It's 40 minutes north of Missoula. And amazing area for pheasant and waterfowl at the time. It isn't anymore, but it was at the time. And anyway, we're driving around hunting with my brother's prairie falcon, and we see this passage gerfalcon, which is like the holy grail of birds to have. It's not even on the radar.
So when you say you've seen one, are you in your truck glassing with
yeah,
binos?
We're looking for pheasant for Dale's Prairie, and this gerfalcon comes flying up out of this cornfield. I think she probably had a duck down out there, and we spooked her off of it. Well, she goes up to a telephone pole, and we have homing pigeons in the car. It's part of it, goes with the sport. You throw them if you don't produce quarry, just for something to chase and exercise, and it's a good substitute. So we had pigeons. We always had a harness. It's a leather harness with fishing line nooses you tie on it, and this trap is as old as time for falconry. This trap probably goes back thousands of years. I mean, it's been refined a little bit.
It's like a fishing hook almost.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously it's not going to harm it.
Their toes get stuck in those nooses and their slip knots. So they come down and grab this pigeon. We throw a pigeon into a field. It's out there flopping.
Are you still there? Did you leave?
We leave, but we stay inside of it.
Okay, so you throw the pigeon, you leave, you watch it.
And boy, they usually come pretty quick. And yeah, she did. This gerfalcon leaves the pole. She stoops it, checks it out. She's back and forth, and then she I want it, and she commits to it and goes in and takes it. And I remember so excited. I think it's probably the most exciting day of my life. Just that we might catch a gerfalcon, which was unheard of. And I was 18 years old. I had maybe no business with one, but at least other falconers probably thought
I don't even know what a gerfalcon
No, that's
looks
what
like.
yeah, I'm sorry. We got to talk about it. So you're saying a gerfalcon?
GYR. They come from the Arctic, and it is the bird.
That's the subspecies of the falcon.
Or
the species.
That is the species.
That is the species of the falcon. Whereas this is a peregrine.
Yep, that would be falco is the genus. Species would be peregrine, peregrinus. And then subspecies, her is pelei. This bird is, Falco rusticolus.
So how old was the bird that you were trying to?
Young. She was a bird born that year.
So you could see.
You can tell by the plumage.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So
we knew
this is wild.
We could keep her, but that bird would have been born in the Arctic. I mean, they only live circumpolar, but only in the Arctic.
Wow.
So her life that summer would have been two adults feeding her ptarmigan somewhere in the Arctic. And maybe other birds, but they.
So the bird it comes down, it decides to attack.
Yeah, it got it, and we bumped her a few times off the pigeon, and she wasn't caught. And we fixed the nooses back off, and down she'd come again. It took.
Oh, this was not first try.
No. I mean, it was like drug out until almost dark, and we're like, this is it. If you don't get
so you're on pins and needles for a long
unbelievable. And finally, it's like, this is it. I'm walking out another time, and she's getting sick of seeing us because she's like, these guys have bumped me 5 or 6 times, and she's already nervous, and she's looking at me, and I'm going through a fence, and she baits off the pigeon, flies off the pigeon, and I can see she just falls to the ground face first, and her foot's caught, and I rolled through that barbed wire fence, demolished my down coat, and then went out and dove on this bird and had this bird.
So do you have? No, you've got like leather gloves at this?
No, in fact, we didn't even have a hood, we weren't really trapping, but
But you weren't expecting it.
No, and certainly, but I needed a bird and I wanted a bird, but I thought I'm going to get a prairie falcon, which is a pretty common falcon down here. It's kind of a little smaller than her, but a good falcon to hunt with.
So cool.
And we wind up catching this passage gerfalcon.
So you jump on the bird.
Get her, we catch her. She's caught on the pigeon, and Dale comes out. My brother helps me. We undo her from the pigeon. She's got a couple nooses on her toes. And all the way home, we just carried her.
You just held her.
I held her around her shoulders.
Like around the wings, like you'd hold a chicken.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, but the feet are moving?
Yeah. I mean, but she was real calm.
They calmed down.
She was real calm, and they almost like just sit there. It's kind of almost shocky or something, but she was real calm, except it would have been nice to have had a hood to put on her. And so we drove that almost hour, back to Missoula with her was sitting there, got her home, got a hood on her, and then put these, the equipment. They wear these, they need bracelets, these things that these jesses go to. So
just so listeners, we're looking at this falcon right now.
It looks like a metal bird band with leather on the inside.
It's got, those are fancy ones. It's got her name and her phone number, and it says reward.
Okay.
It's just another way maybe to get her back if she gets lost. But so anyway, we got this fancy bird, and it was unbelievable to get a bird like that.
That was the first falcon.
That was my first falcon. I was 18 years old.
How long did you have that
I
falcon?
had her for 2 years. Amazing watching that. They are probably the fastest animal on the planet, under their own power.
So and just we don't have to dive too deep because it might take.
No,
long.
we might have
How do you
to.
break? How do you break the
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my question. Is so
So it's a wild bird.
Yeah.
it's a wild bird.
Yeah.
What do you have to do before you fly it the first time
Trust.
to
It's-
keep it
yeah.
from just I'm going to keep
Yeah, it's
going
just-
on down to Central America now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's just all trust. There is no discipline. They wouldn't understand it, and you'd ruin them the first time. Even if you lose your temper, they look at you funny.
There's no negative reinforcement.
Nothing. You set them up to succeed, and you create experiences to be positive and to go in that direction, to include day one, but to include hunting as well. I mean, you set them up like this is going to be a good experience, and you kind of know that's garbage, and I need to not fly her there, and that's
Avoid
situation.
that place. And
So it's a lot of time on the fist, and you're feeding her tidbits. And it's funny. I mean, she ate the first day the hood came off. And Gyr falcons are sort of known to be pretty nice. I mean, they can be as imprints. If you raise that bird as a youngster, as an imprint, they're almost dog tame. It's the one bird that it truly is like a pet.
So if you were to have gotten, which you said is illegal, an adult, but if you would have, that bird doesn't do the same thing as that young bird, does it?
They say, I think I actually worked with one adult to let her go. She was shot.
Yeah.
The Fish Wildlife Service and the Peregrine Fund gave her to me to rehab her.
Yeah.
And she was an adult peregrine that was shot on the Oregon coast. And anyway, she was surprisingly as nice. And she'd been sort of abused. She'd been in rehab, and she'd been given medications. She had a gunshot wound to her wing and a pin in there to put things back together. So I thought it was a bird that might be a nightmare, and I was shocked how accepting she was of me.
So it's interesting because in my mind I would think that you catch the bird, which is amazing, and then I would think that breaking it, or I don't know what the official term would be, manning the bird would be just as hard. But it sounds like they're pretty.
It's timely. But again, it took a month, and in 1 month she was hunting for me.
Wow.
But every day you're working on this bird.
Oh, the commitment of time with these is almost unrealistic. From whether it's manning a new one, but particularly now just hunting with her.
Sure.
And taking her and getting her flown at quarry, finding, sharp-tailed grouse, sage grouse. I go to South Dakota and I fly her at greater prairie chickens. It's just becoming so much harder to access land and good quarry numbers. You need lots. It's like making a new puppy. You need lots of game when you're making a new bird.
It takes a lot of birds to make a good bird dog.
It does. And these are no different. It's when they're young, it's the same thing. Then you need to put them on game and different varieties. It needs to be easy stuff when they need it, and it needs to they need to be challenged when they're ready to be challenged, and they need to fail some as well, and then you need to go back and forth and push them when they need it to get the best out of them.
Wow.
So on this first bird that you trapped, the Gyr falcon, you said you had it for 2 years. Is that the lifespan?
No. I could have had her. I have one now that's 20 years old. She's retired.
Wow.
It's a peregrine, but she's 20, and she could live maybe to be 24.
What's a lifespan?
Maybe 24, 25. But, a lot can happen to them. Even in falconry, in the wild, 12 or 13 or 14 would be really pretty darn old.
And what would be the reason why they wouldn't live longer?
Usually something a wreck.
An injury.
If an injury, if I've had birds that had fatal injuries if they'd have been a wild bird.
Sure.
Hit a fence and break a leg, damage themselves, and I put them back together, and they go on to hunt 10 more years. If that had been a wild bird, it was dead.
Fast. Yeah, it wouldn't have been able to harvest animals.
Once they make it to an adult in the wild, they do pretty well. The attrition rate occurs as a young bird. It's like a teenager.
You got to learn.
Yeah, you think of what you did, and the birds are no different.
And that'd be the first how many years of his life?
The first year. If they make it past that first year, they literally say 60 to 70% of young birds, raptors, don't make it.
Wow.
So, you know,
and not do. Is there a predator for?
there
for
is.
them?
I mean, the other bigger hawks, big fish, little fish, sort of eagles
Wow,
can be
really?
a problem. Great horned owls are a huge problem. She almost got killed by a great horned owl last year hunting her, and I was really lucky that she didn't.
This one in front of us?
Yeah, it had her, and she chased a sharp tail a long ways away and wound up catching it. And it was evening, and you know, thankfully she was wearing really fancy telemetry that I can. It's actually GPS telemetry now. It's a little thing she wears on a biwit. They put them on around their neck. They do a backpack. She wears hers on her leg. That's what this little blue nut.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. It pops on there.
The
Okay.
transmitter threads right into that.
And so you have that on a GPS unit?
And it's crazy. It works.
Yeah,
It's
Like a
it do
dog,
it.
like a dog with mountain lion.
This is the coolest thing I've
Yeah.
seen him. It's an iPad.
it's
So I got to see him fly it a couple times.
Yeah.
But he releases the bird, and I didn't know what to expect because I've always just been fascinated with Peregrin Falcons. I love things that are fast.
Yeah.
And it's the fastest moving
Yeah.
recorded live animal.
How fast?
240 in
What?
a dive.
When it's in its dive.
Are you kidding
Yeah.
me?
A guy trained one to skydive with him, and there's videos of it. You can pull it up. Ken Franklin skydiving with a Peregrine. YouTube it sometime and check it out.
He's keeping up with the dude skydiving?
Well, he's blowing the guy away that's skydiving.
Yeah.
Just
Guys,
nose
It's
down.
just toying with
Dude's
him.
at terminal velocity, and this bird's just
Zipping all over the place?
Yeah, he drops a lure that's aerodynamic, and there is no such thing as terminal velocity for something that's very aerodynamic. He drops this weighted lure, and it falls away from him as he's skydiving.
As he's falling.
And the bird just disappears and leaves him in the dust.
Shut up.
And they have something on the bird that's recording her speed. And he said, I think they recorded her at 238, and he wasn't so sure she couldn't do a lot faster.
Yeah.
Is by what it looked.
So I've known that for a while. And my son is just loves things that are fast too. So but I never thought about anything other than that dive, that just kind of tuck and speed. So Brian releases his bird, and I didn't know what to expect, but it flew almost a perfect circle, and he's watching on the iPad, and I'm trying to watch
Does it
the
have
bird.
topography on your pad and everything?
It puts it
Yeah.
over Google
Sure,
Earth
sure.
image.
Okay, so you can see some stuff.
map.
It's got an elevation, and it's just climbing.
And
fast.
it's giving you live results from where the bird is.
Speed and elevation and direction.
But it's flying this almost perfect circle around Brian, and it's just going, and it's every ring. It looks like a screw. It's just
Going
getting up and up and up, and it's climbing, and I lose sight of the thing. Like, it's so high.
She flies really high. This is a great bird. Falconers like their birds to go way up high. American falconers. That's how the Arabs hunt birds off the fist out of a car, and it's a chase, a pursuit chase, whereas we
More of an ambush for us.
and we've sort of adapted with English falconry, which is where our falconry came from, Scotland, England, and it's a waiting on a bird that goes way up high, and the higher the better, because that's the big blistering stoop, that you get to watch. It's hard to do. It's hard to train a bird to do that and then keep it there year after year after year, because they want to do the bare minimum. And she flies 1,000 feet higher than she has to kill that sharp-tailed grouse.
So how high off the deck are they going?
She's
Is she
often
going?
flying between 1,000 and 1,800 feet high. And at 1,400 feet, you can't really see her, but you can see her on the iPad.
Sure.
It gives her the readout. There's a thing called a Pocketlink this telemetry company makes, and it lets that thing she's wearing, that transmitter, it sends the signal of that to your iPad. So that's what this Pocketlink thing is doing,
Sure.
and it's getting the signal from the satellite. That goes to the satellite.
Sure.
This talks to that, and it
then-
sends it
yeah.
to the iPad. So you're looking at the beautiful screen of an iPhone or an iPad, watching this
it.
Google map, and you're the red dot, she's the blue dot, and hers is changing 16 times a second. It's real time.
It was crazy. So how long does it take to get up to that 1,000, 1,500, 1,800 feet?
Not too long. I'm thinking if she wants to, get serious about it, she's up there in certainly less than a minute, about a minute,
It's a
minute
serious
and a half.
stairmaster
Really
right there.
climbing.
So she went and
Unreal.
killed a sharp tail.
Oh yeah. So
Sorry, I want to hear the owl story.
She missed it in the
Yeah.
stoop. She
The stoop.
that's
the
that
dive.
big dive. Yeah, that's called a stoop.
And so eventually, when it comes into your vision, you're able to see that bird
oh yeah,
diving.
you can hear it. You hear it. And
You can hear it.
It sounds like a jet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Russia air on these guys, it's amazing. And if it's a cold winter night, it's unbelievably loud. but you typically hear her coming, and you might be able to see her. She might be only 800 feet high.
How fast is she when she's on the stoop?
Typically from those heights, she's doing sort of 110 to 140 in that range. The fastest I've ever seen, actually, the male I have, one of the stoops, he did 168. So they do what they have to, but they got they got a lot to grab from. I mean, they're up to, that's unrealistic, probably stooping at 238, but that's what that bird had to do in that situation out of an airplane from
it's like you're saying, like, why would it go faster?
Yeah, and it's actually, it may be a hindrance. Like if they're flying ducks that are circling around the pond, the refuge for the ducks is to come back to the pond, and the falcon knows it. So they're coming down with brakes on. You can and those stoops might be 90 miles an hour.
Sure, yeah, just whatever it takes.
But prairie grouse tend to get the best out of them because they're unbelievably. Until you've seen a falcon fly a prairie grouse, you'll have a whole new respect for a sharp tail or a prairie chicken, because they have a gear that you'll never see when you're gun hunting.
Oh.
And they are bold about using it, and they're very cocky about trying to outfly your falcon. And that's why guys love to fly them. They're really great quarry, and they will make your bird fly good.
This is so interesting.
Your bird will either quit them because they're so hard to catch. She needs to have some success. I mean, they need to catch them, so ideally they catch some young as they're growing up, and they mature with the grouse. But, guys that want to travel with their falcons to grouse country that have only ever flown their birds at ducks, they may never catch one with those. And those birds might be really good flying birds.
Yeah.
But they just don't know that quarry and what it takes to catch them.
Wow.
Some adapt and maybe pull it off, and a lot of them might quit it. They might not even stoop that quarry when they see it as an extreme case. But
so in this case, the bird was going, and then it got a sharp tail.
She flew it down 2 miles away and caught it. And I could see on the iPad that she was in a creek bottom. And well, that's not good, because I'm thinking owls. It's that time of evening already. And what if she didn't get it? I could drive this way, and maybe she'll come, and I call her to the lure. I just swing this thing, and she's trained to come back to me. I swing a dead quail, basically, which is her hawk food. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go around and drive right to her, because I just.
Does she hear it, or does she see the
She
thing?
sees it. Yeah. Yep. She sees it. And so, thankfully, I drove to her, and it was a ways around. It took me, 6 miles to get around to where she was. And when I got out, it was pretty dark by now. And I'm holding the iPad, and it's showing me. She said she's 100 yards away, and she's right there. And I'm walking through the cottonwood trees, and I start seeing this big thing flailing around on her. I thought a raccoon had her, and she's calling, distressed. And I get up there, and it's a great horned owl has her, and it's got her. She has the grouse, which isn't even dead yet. So it got her right away. The grouse is there, and it was bit a little bit on the neck. I put the thing in my pocket and let it go later. But she was under some cover, and that's what saved her. She went underneath some willows that were bowed over, and that owl slammed into the top of those willows, had her with 1 foot. She had the owl by a foot, and that owl, when I got there, was just starting to get its head to her, and she was going to have a horrible day. I mean, it was going to eat her starting at her leg. Oh, wow. And just eat her alive. And it was getting there when I got there, and I broke them up, and oh boy, I didn't know if it had grabbed her chest. I mean, there could be some pretty serious injuries.
Did you grab the owl?
Yeah, I just pulled it off of her. And
I feel like that'd be really terrifying.
How big's the owl?
They're big. It was a big female, so much bigger than her. Yeah.
And you just grabbed it?
Yeah.
Also, I wouldn't even know what to do.
The other note in that whole story is that you were like, yeah, I knew what time it was, and the owls would be a concern.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, seriously, never once in my life have I been at any time of the day and been like, it's about time for owls. I've never thought that
falconers think about it. Unfortunately, you think about it with your bird. It's amazing how many guys have lost birds to either golden eagles or even bald eagles, but eagles or great horned owls. They're watching that predator hunt. And, with eagles, it's sort of, the witching hour not to fly is the thermal hours, sort of late morning or midday. Boy, I avoid those hours like the plague because of eagles.
All the time. And we have a lot of eagles here, right?
Yeah, a lot of eagles. I fly real early in the morning, and best of all is maybe very late in the evening, and the eagles are typically not, they're not on thermals, and they're not way up out of sight anymore where they're watching everything.
How fast will an eagle go?
They're surprisingly fast.
But not faster than this bird?
Maybe
close enough to catch it?
I mean, they're getting her on the ground. They're ambushing them when she's on her kill.
Oh, they're looking at them from up top.
They watch that whole flight, and she's chasing.
They're just spying.
Chasing.
It's like a sniper.
Yeah, I mean, they might be sitting on a butte. If we're down in buffalo flying sage grouse, most of those hilltops, if you look, have an eagle sitting on it. Well, they're watching that whole flight, and if that eagle is hungry and she sees your bird,
it'll ambush your bird.
Catch a grouse, 2 miles away down. The grouse is heading for cover. It's intimidated, and there's a falcon behind it, so it's going for cover, which is typically tall. The drainage is where the sage is tall. So the falcon gets in there, probably catches it, and the eagle says, "That bird got that. I'm going to go take her sage grouse or take the falcon or
both. Do both. Yeah,
whatever I can get." And so that's a real threat and a real
eagles
concern.
and owls.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Knock on wood, I've never had it happen to the end, but I've had close calls of all of them multiple times. And I've had 2 eagles in the air chasing a bird that they rooted off the kill, didn't even go for the kill, and then were trying to fly my falcon out of the air, and it was looking like they were probably going to
it'd be like
do it.
It's like a dogfight type deal. Like they're trying to fly him out of the air.
My falcons are terrified. I mean, mentally, the good thing they're physically and mentally strong, because if he would have headed for cover, a long ways away from me, I couldn't have helped him. They would have killed him. But
so how does the peregrine, or I guess any falcon, how does it kill its quarry?
They're real efficient. That's another great question. Hawks kill with their feet, and they just sort of not so humane. I mean, it's what they do. They hold it and they start eating. Like a wolf, they kind of hold it.
A hawk will.
Yep, a hawk or an eagle. A falcon wants it dead. They're like a cat. They're like a mountain lion. I mean, lion, the first thing they do when they get on a deer is get up to the throat, and they, when it's dead, they'll start eating. Well, these guys have that notch on her beak. If you look close, there's a point, and behind it there's a notch, and that is to get in there on the vertebra and separate the vertebrae and the neck. They get in there, bite real hard, and twist.
So that thing right there will snap the neck on a bird or a rat, on
a grouse or yep.
So in the stoop.
Sometimes they kill them when they hit them.
Okay, so they're going crazy fast,
yeah.
And are they just? That's my question. Is it to knock it out of the air, or is it to break its back with its feet?
Yeah,
I mean, how does that?
It's sort of individual to the bird, even amongst the same species. Some like to just crush it as hard as they can hit it with their feet. It sounds
so they're pretty tough.
Sounds reckless, and it looks reckless. My peregrines have usually, they call it binding. They bind to the bird.
Grab it.
They selectively grab an appendage. They grab the quarry by
going that fast.
Yep,
they're selective.
They go in and they bleed off some speed, and then they grab something like a leg, a wing.
So they hit it more. They're diving vertically, but then at the last
they
second,
level out behind it.
They kind of hit horizontal.
They want to definitely do that. Come in behind it. Even the ones that strike to knock it to the ground, they're coming in behind it to lose some speed. They don't want to hit something at 150 or 60 or 70. And they're going too fast.
And then if it doesn't kill it in that strike, it's a controlled fall.
They fall.
At that
if she binds to it, which she usually does, she grabs it by a leg or a wing and then falls to the ground. And the second she gets it to the ground, she's going for the neck, and then she wants to bite it and break its neck.
Wow.
Ducks are tough. I mean, you can let a lot of ducks.
It can be hard to ring a duck. I mean,
and we let a lot of them go because they're totally fine. You get there, and she's got this duck, and she's trying to get to the neck, and maybe she's bit it once, but they got to do a lot more than that to a duck. And it's things totally fine, except it got caught by a peregrine. and
bad day.
You can kind of like
caught by a peregrine
fishing,
So did that give satisfaction to the bird?
Oh, totally. As long as you feed her, I mean, and
you feed her, but the hunting, she's happy with that quarry find.
Yeah, if she gets the reward of even getting the opportunity to stoop wild quarry. That's a really good thing.
So if it got a duck and you're like, oh, it didn't even kill the duck, you let the duck go. Do you then give it a feed?
Yeah. I feed her even if they fly really well. I mean, all she wants, and I fly 36 hours later. I feed her so much food, and we've gotten away from, or a lot of falconers have, of being a slave to the scale, to where you're weighing that bird. It's like, I need that bird cut and here at this weight. More falconers are pushing that limit on their weight. And
so let's talk about
grams.
Let's talk about weight. Also, let's talk about why.
Yeah, well,
I don't know what that means.
No, it's yeah. You're
weighing them.
Yeah, there's a weight where they probably will perform at their best. They're not so hungry that they're weak, and they're not so fat that they absolutely don't even want to hunt. I mean, they might just go sit.
Sure, because they're no longer in the wild, so like they don't have this perfect balance. No. If you fed it enough, it would be useless.
Yeah, I mean, they'll lax a lot.
So you're trying to keep it in this ideal fighting weight.
Yep.
Okay.
And people probably used to cut their birds harder because
meaning lighter.
Their weight, they would cut their weight lower.
Okay.
Just because it was easier to get them back. We didn't have this fancy telemetry, and now with this amazing telemetry, it's so state of the art, and we can push those envelopes and do totally different, take risks and like, well, this is maybe a little bit risky, but I'll get her back. I'm pretty sure I'll get her back. And there's such an investment in time in making these that you don't want to lose one, but you want to see it at its best as well. And it's funny, you take a young bird, and it's amazing the weights that you can fly that bird at, because it starts at this weight. It doesn't have any muscle. Muscle weighs a heck of a lot more than fat. You're taking the fat off, putting muscle on. She's getting strong. She's flying more and more. And every day she flies, you're trying to set her up for a kill, to success, to catch a duck or catch something, or back and forth between ducks and upland game. Ducks are pretty easy to set up a really quality flight for a young bird, so we all like to fly our birds at waterfowl because you can see them on the pond. They're there. And I can get those going, and the size of the pond that you select, it kind of makes it easy or not so easy, because the pond is the refuge. If you fly a lake with a few ducks on it, you'll never catch one, because they won't leave the water. But anyway, you push this bird, and every flight she flies good or she catches a duck, you feed her all. I feed her all she wants, and so every flight, even 36 hours later, she's typically at a higher weight than she was last time, because now this bird's putting on muscle. She's retaining some of that weight, and after a month of that bird that was flying at 32 ounces now is flying maybe at 37 or 38 ounces, and that's when you really see what a bird can do, because she is strong as can be. But if you at some point you will hit a mark where it's like, wow, I almost lost her. She had no interest in me or doing anything. That's the limit. That might have been with her.
Okay.
As a young bird, I flew her at 40 ounces, and she was out of control.
Out of control as in?
Just leaving, no interest in hunting.
It's like, you could say it's lazy, like it's kind of fat and happy. I'm good.
Really?
Some might just go sit. She'd fly, but nowhere near me, and it was kind of scary. I thought, no, this is.
It's so crazy.
So the weight has exclusively to do with the ability for you to man the bird, ain't it, for it to hunt?
Pretty much, yeah.
Because it's so full and happy that it's just like, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Go find a cliff.
And in the summertime, all summer long, she's not hunting. She's in a big free flight chamber, and she eats all she wants, or she's offered all she wants. But when I pulled her out, I just pulled her out of this chamber on Sunday to start getting her back in shape.
You say you don't fly them in the summer?
No, there's no hunting season, and they're getting their new feathers every single.
You still have to follow game laws.
Yep.
You can't just go like, hey, I'm going to go catch a duck in July.
Yeah, no, you can't. You could fly one at Pigeons, but, we're traveling. It's hot. It's a good break, and probably them a good break from us.
Wow.
They don't mind that downtime. They're being fed well. She's with a male. She actually she laid eggs, and she hatched a baby.
This year?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
So she was busy, but she wasn't busy with anything I was doing.
Wow.
How big is a Peregrine Falcon egg?
I should have brought one in, but it's a little bit smaller than a chicken egg, and really pretty. It's real red,
No kidding.
really bright, modeled, but
wow.
But
I noticed look at the talons on this thing.
Oh, they're substantial.
yeah,
Unreal.
And they, falcons have those long toes, and anything you see with real long, thin toes like that, they're bird hawks. It's for grabbing birds out of the air.
Yeah, so they can wrap around.
It's like a basketball player.
Yep,
You can
sure.
palm a ball.
Yep.
Wow.
So when you say they stoop down, I'm going to reverse a little bit.
Yeah.
When they stoop down and they hit a bird, they can kill the bird upon impact.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Because the speed and that it hits the spine correct, and
they just demolish it, and I think the ground does as much damage as they did. Then it goes on to hit the ground.
Oh, so it'll come. It'll
two
come down.
impacts.
It'll hit the bird, and then it will
let
just
it go.
continue. Oh,
The birds that hit real hard as their way to catch quarry, they don't try to bind. They're just crushing it.
they're hitting it and they're letting it hit the ground.
And they're hitting it so hard in the air, they're doing damage, and then it might hit the ground.
It's the linebacker.
At the full
birds.
weight of.
And then they come back down on it
then they
immediately.
come back and land on it. If
interesting.
you'd be surprised how hard a sharp tail or a prairie chicken can get hit and then hit the ground. And the first time I saw it get up and outfly my falcon, like, how is that possible?
Wow.
That bird got crushed.
Yeah.
And so the prairie grouse, I mean, they've evolved with falcons. This bird in that form has lived for at least 2.5 million years. And so they've evolved with these quarry. What we think we've seen, everything we see of quarry, they're doing because of this. The holding tight, that quail, the things that we like about quarry, the eyesight that they have, the speed that they have, the senses of smell, in big game. That stuff was because of adaptations to wolves, to big cats. For quarry that we fly these at.
I've got one last question, then we're gonna do a thing we do with all of our guests at the top 5. But you're a falconer. You're here in Sheridan, and we've heard of some others. Pete Widener. Yeah. There's a lot in Sheridan.
Yep.
Why is that? Is this like a special place for it, or
I think a lot of it was because of Pete. He's a very well respected falconer in the community, and he had a neat breeding program, and he employed some of us at some point. And Pete Jenny was a past president of the Peregrin Fund. He lives.
Shout out.
He lives here in Sheridan, and so anyway, I think his dad owned a big ranch here, and Pete moved back from Montana and worked on the ranch, and developed the captive breeding program that he has, and had peregrines. So anyway, he met Bob Berry was sort of, he met Pete, and was through Pete Jenny, and he was coming out to fly his falcons. But it is a pretty good area as well for hunting because of the prairie grouse. You're close to sharp-tailed grouse. They're all over right here. And there's sage grouse. There's pretty good waterfowl hunting. The country, these falcons need big prairie country to hunt in, wide open, large expanses of. There's better than Sheridan, much better, especially now. I mean, if you don't own the land,
it's hard.
In Sheridan, it's gotten pretty hard.
Tough.
We got to do this. I mean, you don't have to do it every day, although I used to during the season. They're long seasons. They give us outside. Wyoming is 6-month falconry season. Montana is 7 months. So they give us more months than a gun because there's so few of us doing it.
Yeah.
And the impact is, if she catches one thing, I'm done for maybe 48 hours. I never make her catch 2 things a day. So the impact is pretty low key.
What about wind? I mean, Wyoming's kind of windy.
Yeah, and surprisingly for a place that has prairie grouse, Sheridan is surprisingly not windy. Although you might, compared to other
windy days.
Yeah,
compared to
the season or the
Casper or Cheyenne.
Yeah, the systems change with a vengeance, but in between it's pretty nice here. But they're good. A good falcon, strong, is pretty good flying in wind.
Doesn't matter too much.
I mean, it's an extra challenge, I guess, but she flies wind pretty well. But the quarry is a huge part of it, and what you should fly. If you live where there's, like people back in the eastern United States, a lot of them, the easiest quarry for them to go find is cottontail rabbits and fox squirrels. So they're flying red-tailed hawks. Goshawk. You kind of fly the hawk. Falcon.
That makes sense.
It makes sense for the area you live in. So,
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you fly them every day, pretty much.
When I'm making a new one, I do every day, at least for the first 2 or 3 months, and then I might fly them more sparingly.
Yeah. And then the other thing I just want to mention real quick is that this thing has a hood on its head.
Yep.
We haven't talked about the hood.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I can take it off, too, but she'll talk a little bit. But before we leave, she could maybe the last.
Yeah.
So she doesn't.
So, there's a hood on this bird.
Is it a hood or a helmet?
Hood.
Okay.
It's a hood that it can't see right now.
Nope.
So it's blind. It's still doing everything it needs. I mean, it's walking, it's standing. It seems super comfortable, but it definitely is not able to see. Which, could you explain that to us?
Yeah, really, when you think about inventions for falconry, even telemetry included, that hood is probably the single most important thing that was ever created. You could never do what people have done with these birds for 4,000 years without that hood. That thing that allows you a timeout, with a bird that you take away the sense that it is the most. Their eyesight is beyond belief. It's almost supernatural when you're around them. What you see them capable of with those eyes. I'd like to see through those eyes for a minute just to know.
See exactly what it is.
But when you take that away, they're unbelievably calm, and they're very accepting of that hood. But it lets you put them in a car and take them hunting.
It's not struggling to get it off.
No, and there's no stress. Her sitting here, if she wouldn't sit there like that, if that hood was off, she'd be
popping all over the place,
flying off that perch, and she'd get hurt. So it's for their well-being in situations. I can walk with her in the field behind my English setters when I'm hunting, just like you would be carrying your gun. When the dogs go on point, I can take off all of her equipment except the transmitter, the hood, the jets, the leash. Everything comes off, and she's free to go. And you couldn't have done that, without that hood. Walk for an hour behind your dogs and get a point. Find the grouse, and then let her go when you're ready.
Wow.
It allows you to do everything you do.
Cool.
So it's really pretty neat invention. And they're fancy. I mean, there's hoods that are feather plumes on top and painted, falconry scenes inside and outside, and $1,000 hoods.
Wow.
Beautiful things. This hood is, bottom line, it's got to be very comfortable and fit absolutely perfectly.
I can see where it's like literally cut perfectly for this bird's mouth.
Yeah, when you watch her mouth, that's what you really look for. And if she has a casting, the feathers they eat, but they come out about 12 hours later in this little casting. It's just part of their digestion.
Wow.
It's like a fur ball.
Yeah, exactly. And owls, they all do it. Feathers, bones, hair, whatever they ate comes up in this real tight, compact. She can even cast through that hood, which is a nice peace of mind, because they could choke to death with a hood on if they can't do that. So you'd have to really be mindful.
It's fascinating.
It's unbelievable. I could talk for another hour on it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's very cool.
We're gonna roll into our top 5.
The Weatherby Top 5.
All right. Field biology. What's the craziest thing you've seen while you've been in the field?
Oh boy. Grizzlies, having hard time with bears. So many things. Aircraft problems. Pretty scary. Aircraft problems, flying in helicopters. Climbing. I got stuck on a cliff for hours. Nobody knew where I was. If I couldn't have got out, I don't know what. Should have never been there in the first place. But I was.
Do you usually climb or rappel down?
I had rappelled off of a giant cliff, though, for nothing but to pull some adult eggs, peregrine eggs, for a graduate student. So I really had no business being there. And I wound up getting stuck, Jumar, and back up out of there about 500 or 600 feet. And I got stuck for hours and hours, to the point of I ain't getting it. I don't know how I'm going to get off this, because I can't do it.
Oh, wow.
And that was a bummer. But boating in Greenland was a real challenge on that Bering Sea, and just difficult.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
It is. What are your 2 must-have backcountry items?
Binoculars, first. I've got a pair of Swarovski binoculars that go everywhere with me, and an older pair of lights, and they go most everywhere as well. And second, probably boots.
Good boots.
Yeah.
I wear them out.
What do you wear?
All kinds, but schnees, I think right now I've got, I've got a favorite pair of Russell moccasin boots that are custom made, built to your, everyone's feet are almost different size. So they're very expensive, but they're literally, I think there's 15 measurements per boot, per foot.
Wow. So, awesome.
Yeah, they're nice.
Awesome. If you had to estimate how many game birds you've taken falconry.
I'm embarrassed to say because it's not supposed to be that productive, but they can be really good. I don't know, but a lot, I guess.
Hundreds? Thousands?
No, probably not thousands, but I've been doing it
You've
for
been doing
40
it.
years.
Yeah, I mean, I would think.
I mean, when I was a young person, I thought, it all revolved around how many birds you catch is how good a falcon you are. And I made one bird catch 100 ducks one year, and I'll never do that again.
Sure, because
I've evolved, thankfully. But
that makes sense.
But it is, to me,
it's more or less for the love of the bird.
Yeah, and I want to see the flight. It's all about the flight and seeing a great flight, and that doesn't need to involve a successful
a certain
flight.
number of birds.
Exactly.
Absolutely, that makes total sense.
Mm-hmm. Finish this statement. Okay. People that fish. Maybe they drink beer too. People that hunt usually hunt and fish. People that trap usually trap, bow hunt, rifle hunt, fish. But falconers...
Social distance. Nobody knows our favorite spots. It's like I've never seen people so protective of their hunting place, just because it's. I mean, I've got all these passions. I gun hunt with a shotgun. I gun hunt with a rifle. I bow hunt with traditional archery equipment. I fly fish, and they're all unbelievable passions for mine, and they have been since I was a kid.
And you run bird dogs?
Yeah, I've got English setters, and I always have. But that's probably the biggest part of my life is the dogs. But if all of the hobbies had to go, this would be the only one left. This one, it's as exciting for me today as it was the day I did it.
It's super cool.
It makes catching a grouse again like I was a kid.
Yeah.
It makes the excitement and the difficulty. It seems like it's almost shouldn't even be able to happen.
Well,
great answer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Last question is, what's your biggest concern for birds of prey?
Yeah, boy, just a changing world. I see things, and not just birds of prey. Seeing the demise of quarry. I never thought I would see that. I wondered how I would get a fancy bird to fly. I wanted to work for the Peregrin Fund. Some of that was, it was selfish. I wanted a peregrine. I wanted to be around peregrines, and but as it turned out, I was able to help that species, and I'm glad to give the conservation back, give something back. But now I've got the fancy falcons, and the quarry has become a big issue. And I go to places where I used to go, and there's nothing there, and the landscape has changed so much. We've got a big impact on this world. 8 billion people, and we need, we're changing things, and raptors, they're one of the first you see because they're at the top of that. They don't exist at densities like their quarry. They don't control their quarry ever. People say, well, we should put peregrines and control the pigeons. It doesn't work like that. They'll certainly eat pigeons, but it just allows pigeons to probably almost, thrive, and they're culling pigeons, and they're probably doing good things for that quarry. But I don't
just change.
Yeah.
Change.
Yeah.
So last thing, we usually end there, but I have to ask one last question: is if somebody's interested to get into this hobby sport, where can they go to get information?
Yep.
What can they expect? Like I know you a little bit now, and you don't just have falcons. You've got a pigeon operation.
Yep.
You've got dogs. You have to have a place to keep them.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Where can they go to learn about it?
Yep. The first place people should start is their fish and game. It's managed now by the state game agencies, which is nice because it used to be a joint Fish Wildlife Service state joint permit. Well, anytime the government's involved in something, there's undue restraints or just difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, within the last 5 years, it became state managed the falconry portion of it, which is great. It streamlined things. But they usually have a list. They give the test.
Hey, can you, while you're talking, can you take the hood off? And maybe as we're kind of wrapping up here, she might make a little bit of noise.
Yep, I'll have to get her on my glove for that. But yeah, I'd start at your Fish and Game, whatever your state game agency is called. They're the ones that issue the exam. They usually have a list of sponsors, people who are willing to take on a falconer and help them. There's study guides for that test. California has a list of questions that would really help you pass that test. But the sponsors, like if I sponsored somebody, you'd certainly help them with the equipment, where you get it, how you make it, the building, that the perches are right, the bird's not going to hurt. It's all about the well-being of the bird that's in your care. It's a husbandry thing, and that should come natural. I mean, everything you do and anything that can go wrong will. I mean, I promise you.
Sure.
They need to be absolutely perfect in feather. These feathers are their livelihood, and these things, I mean, they can't break them. The perches that they sit on and stuff allow that to not occur. So anyway, there's a lot. But
it's not a simple thing.
No, it's almost an unrealistic investment in time.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, I'll take her.
Here comes the hood.
Hood's coming off.
Whoa.
Oh, wow, she's beautiful.
Wow, look how big those eyes are.
Yeah.
Actually, was not expecting
They're
that.
enormous. Yeah. Well, if she makes sounds great, if not great.
She probably will when I put the hood back on.
Yeah.
She usually objects a little bit. Anyway.
Brian, we really appreciate you coming in. This has been fascinating. We maybe need to do a part 2 at some point in the future. This is just really, really cool.
Well, thank you guys. I enjoy talking about all this
Yeah,
stuff.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.
You bet.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you guys. You bet.